We'll do it live. F it.
How would you describe the Dabbleverse to someone who's might be watching right now, who's never heard of it?
I've tried to describe it before. Essentially, it's a constellation of podcasts that all orbit Stuttering John Melendez, a personality formerly of the Howard Stern Show, because for whatever reason, he is eminently fun to poke fun at. So a cottage industry has arisen whereby various podcasts do other things, but primarily make fun of him. And his reactions to them making fun of him help spur that engine on and keep it running.
Yeah, and it has been running for a couple of years now, at least.
Yeah, I think I heard Karl say that he did his first episode of Who Are These Podcasts that was on John. I'm not saying the first episode of his show, but the first time he did a show on John was maybe even as much as 4.5 years ago. It was a while ago. He said he did his show on John's podcast because that's what he does, is talk about terrible podcasts. And then he moved on. And it was only when John had an absolute hissy fit about it and started threatening to sue and threatening to come after him and try to get his Patreon taken down and all this stuff, that it spurred Karl to do more shows about him. And then Shuli, formerly of the Howard Stern Show, left Stern, and that freed him up to finally respond to John, because John had been taking shots at him for a while at that point. And so he started the Uncle Rico show, and he was on with Karl before he started his own show, I think. And so the two of them kind of helped get each other more attention in the realm of looking at John and making fun of him. Yeah. There was some synchronicity there. And that was the genesis of this industry that is making fun of one late 50s guy who was on a radio show 30 years ago.
Yeah, and a lot of that he brings on himself. But before we get to that and Stuttering John, I'm almost just being a Howard Stern. I think everyone in this Dabbleverse, or sometimes it's referred to as lately the Hackverse, but the two and two are pretty synonymous. But it really, I feel like everyone in this community, if we want to call it that, is either a super fan of Howard Stern or Opie and Anthony or radio in general, and that's how we have all kind of arrived at it.
Well, I think so to some extent, but I think it has a life of its own. One of the guys that was listening to my live stream this evening said he was in Egypt, of all places. How a guy in Egypt, who's probably not my age, he's probably younger, how he even hears about a Howard Stern or any of the personalities associated with that show is a mystery to me. So I think at the core of this audience are people who remember that era, people who grew up listening to Stern on the radio. I listen to Stern. I listen to Opie and Anthony. I listen to Rover's Morning Glory, which has this weird intersection with this universe. And, I used to commute to a job an hour and a half one way. So I spent 3 hours every day on the road. I needed a constant supply of talk radio to keep me going so I wasn't bored out of my mind. But there's a younger generation of people, like when Little Mir and Mega G interviewed Stuttering John. These guys are way too young to have ever had anything to do with that universe.
Yeah,
they've come to it later from the internet. So it's fascinating to watch successive younger generations find this universe and poke at these old men when they have no idea of their genesis, and they don't need to know. They don't need to have listened to Howard Stern back when the stuff he did on the radio was absolutely scandalous.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what's the power of YouTube, I guess you would say, is I do like the fact that Lil Mir and these younger guys are here doing this podcasting and fans of that show. Even though we grew up on it when it was happening live, they can still go back and relive it. And obviously what attracts them to it is the same thing that attracted us to it. I think there's definitely a demographic of men that are older like us that grew up on radio, that didn't have the internet. So radio is everything, radio and TV, but especially in your car, I've heard you mention Rush Limbaugh before, and Same here. There was something about hearing one person talk that I could just listen to and retain the information. Stern. Who else? There was another one I was thinking about. Or I thought I saw you on your show earlier today talking about Savage.
Michael Savage, G. Gordon Liddy.
Yeah, I remember that. Listen to that too.
There were so many back in the day.
Art Bell. I mean, from morning to all night. It was.
Oh yeah.
You know.
We all knew that one weird kid who would stay up all night listening to radio shows overnight, like Art Bell.
Yeah.
You know, I knew this kid in like grade school who would take caffeine pills and stay up at night and listen to the forbidden radio shows, and he thought he was so cool.
Yeah. I was a art student, so in college I would pull all-nighters and do projects and just listen to Art Bell. Art Bell for me is definitely an influence. Stern is definitely an influence, probably my biggest. But like Little Mirror and those guys, I never discovered Opie and Anthony until a few years ago because he was never really syndicated here. And when I had Sirius, I was just listening to Stern all the time. So
yeah.
But Opie and Anthony, I discovered them a little bit later, and very, very funny. Not so much now, especially Opie. I'm not a big fan. Are you a fan of Opie? Well, I saw you tweeting about him earlier today.
No, I was giving him grief. I mean, Opie was never the funny guy. He was always the straight man on the show. And he was good at being the administrator of that show. But over time, and I've heard Anthony talk about this, and I've listened to some of the broadcasts he's done where he talked about the deterioration of their relationship. Like, over time, they genuinely grew to dislike each other. And Anthony's of the opinion that it's because Greg expected them to be friends outside of the show, but they in fact didn't have a lot in common as people. You know, they're very different types of people. And so when Anthony managed to get himself in trouble and get fired, Greg didn't go to bat for him because he saw it as a chance to finally get out from under this guy and do his own thing. The problem is that Greg Opie Hughes himself is not a draw. He's not interesting. And, you know, the mediocre attempts at broadcasting online that he's done since are a testament to that fact. I'm not trying to insult the guy. He's just not that interesting.
No, I agree. And that's the thing about him and John, back to Stuttering John. It's like you cannot criticize him for anything. I mean, I've done some Dabbleverse videos. It's not everything I do, but I make sure to give people credit. I give John a ton of credit. I give Shuli a ton of credit. I might not like him all the time, but I do give him a ton of credit. But if you say one little thing, forget all that good stuff you said about him, you are automatically a troll or a hater.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, there's definitely two approaches in this constellation of podcasts. There are people who understand that giving each other grief and even insulting people is not that big a deal. And then some people take that to an extreme, like Vince the lawyer will go on your show and insult you even as he's saying nice things about you. And expect you to be okay with all of it. And then there's people who treat this like it's 4th and 5th grade. And, well, you went on the show of someone I don't like, and you said mean things about me, and we're not best friends anymore. Yeah. And John himself constantly talking about friends, best friends. He was saying to DG, we're going to be best friends forever, you and me. And it was just so cringeworthy.
Really?
You know, you're a grown man. You're almost 60 years old. You should not be interacting with human beings in this way. And yet he does.
Yeah, he does. He is a definition of insanity. I mean, yeah, everyone's his best friend. Anyone who gives him a remote amount of attention, friends for life until the next day, you know, when they...
Well, and I watched, there was one show in particular when DG was acting as his co-host.
Yeah.
DG was trying to agree with him hard enough to stay in John's good graces, and it was not possible. John got it into his head that DG was disagreeing, and DG's like, no, I'm agreeing with you. But because John didn't understand something that they were talking about, he assumed it was disagreement, and DG could not grovel hard and fast enough to get out from under his ire.
Oh man, yeah, that's a great thing. A misunderstanding. I think I've seen John Stuttering John Melendez is a case study in so many different things. I mean, you can go down so many different That's why he's so fascinating, but he's not he doesn't realize he's not fascinating for the reasons we're fascinated with him. And
he'll go through this litany, this chant he does where he talks about everything he's ever accomplished in life as if he's trying to convince himself that he's good enough and accomplished enough, and gosh darn it, people like him. And he just doesn't, if you have to convince me this hard, it's weird that someone this successful is so unhappy all the time.
Yeah. And yeah. Oh God, I know it's absolutely bonkers, but I think, and this is where we'll probably disagree because I've had this discussion with El Horrible and some other folks. I think he's completely delusional. Like, I think when he looks in the mirror, he sees what he thinks he is, which is great at anything.
No, I agree with you. I believe he does buy that. I know that Karl at Who Are These Podcasts thinks that maybe it's all a gigantic scam and that John is in on it, but I don't think so. I think he would have to be the most brilliant actor who ever lived to pull that off. Like he's going to get to the end of his life and suddenly start speaking the Queen's English. Be like, I must tell you, it was all a scam. Tell the people. So,
like Kevin Spacey at the end of The Usual Suspects movie.
Right, like he suddenly loses his limb, and he's like, it was me the whole time. But he managed to get himself into huge trouble today. There's some talk about that his channel might be suspended because he was doing his live stream, and I tuned in for part of it. I especially always tune in for the beginning, which is what I call the running of the grievances. It's like the running of the bulls in Pamplona. Every beginning of every live stream for John is when he tells you who he hates today. Okay. So I'm listening, and I was on a delay because I'd had to pause the audio. And he was interviewing Joey C. at some point. Joey was in his car, and they were yelling back and forth. And then all of a sudden, the feed went dead. And I didn't think anything of it because John does stuff like that all the time. Come to find out, I found out later while watching Shuli's network, he was on with someone he thought was the guy who calls himself Dabblestorian, but the person who came on was an imposter who had the link because I think he gave a link to Patrick Melton and Melton tweeted it out. The guy who came on was an Australian fellow, or at least doing an Australian accent, sounded almost nothing like Dabblestorian, but John was buying it. And then suddenly he pushes a button and there's porn on John's screen. I think he leapt back like he'd been burned in a fire, and he deleted that stream. It's still up on Facebook, or it was as of a couple hours ago. But I don't know how this works. I would have thought if nobody reported it, as long as you deleted it, you'd be okay. But now there's talk that maybe his stream got suspended. So I don't know the answer. And I haven't seen him tweet about it. I looked at his Twitter feed to see if maybe he'd complained that, that the Noz player got my channel pulled down or something like that. Weirdly, the folks on the Uncle Rico show, when they got this news while they were on the air, rather than pulling out the party favors and gleefully celebrating the downing of his channel, the way John has done explicitly, they were like, well, how do we get him back on earlier? So, and then, I'm not saying that this is not some great and wonderful virtue on their part. It's completely self-serving. If John is able to make content, it's better for them. So, I think we can all agree that we'd rather have him able to broadcast than not able to broadcast.
Yeah, it was interesting watching the last year unfold because John was there and then he disappeared for several months. And
like 8.
Came back, And I think it's, at first when he came back, I think he had about a week there, where he was on MLC getting paid $3,000. That first week he was raking the money, but he got tired quick.
Well, it fell down a well within a couple of days. Yeah. He got $3,000 to go on with Kevin. And then right after that, I think Chad paid him like $500. And by the end of 2 or 3 days, he was begging Opie to come on if he'd just Venmo him money for beer. Mm. So he went from like $3,000 to $20 pretty fast.
Yeah. It's like, do you think everyone, I've noticed there's a lot of dime store psychologists like myself and that love to try to diagnose what's going on with him. It ranges from people saying he's a narcissist. That's common. To delusion to ego to all these different things. But I noticed when people analyze him, like, to me, I think he's misunderstood more than anything else. I think he comes across as narcissism, but I think a lot of the times he's just on a different page and he's not understanding what's going on, and he's reacting to a misunderstanding. Does that make sense?
It does. I tend to think of John as an 8 to 12-year-old child. If he was 8 to 12 years old, everything he says and does would make perfect sense. How a man gets to be almost 60 years old but behaves in that way, especially when he's interacting with his mother, I don't know. But if you just close your eyes and picture him as 12 years old, like he's in the 5th grade or so, It makes perfect sense.
That you're right. Maybe we all do that a little bit in his credit when our mom's around. Maybe we do kind of like turn into.
I would like to hope. I don't know. Like his mom is in a lot of his live streams. God bless her. She seems very supportive.
She reminds me of my mother. Mine's Italian. I have an Italian mom, but she reminds me of my mother.
Because I know my mom, she wouldn't understand a blessed thing that was going on, but she'd be happy if I was happy. Like, I don't understand why you called that guy an asshole, but I bet he was.
He is just fascinating to me. I said this in another interview. It's a bad place to be when you're being laughed at and you're making content that's not making you money, that you're being laughed at and trolled, and other people are making you funnier by taking your clips. Like he's not funny when you watch a show. To me, his whole show is awful.
Oh, unwatchable. I can't imagine hating myself enough to want to watch John talk about left-wing politics, because it's not just that his opinions aren't, I'm a right-winger, he's a left-winger, so already I wouldn't like his opinions, but he doesn't understand the opinions he's espousing. He's just repeating half-remembered, mostly misunderstood things that he's, been reported to from CNN. Like, well, they said I should be mad about this, so I'm going to tweet about how much I hate Donald Trump's kids.
Yes.
It's just painful.
I think the pinnacle of painfulness when it comes to this is when Alex Stein, I guess Alex Stein was on John's show or John was on Alex Stein's show.
Oh, yes.
Having a quote unquote debate.
Yeah. Well, I dislike Alex Stein intensely. I find him exceptionally annoying. There's something really, really wrong with that guy. And
I'm not a fan either.
So putting them on the same screen, arguing back and forth with each other, and Alex is doing that weird, high-pitched, hyperactive voice that he does, and John is getting mad because he doesn't understand anything that's happening. Like, Stein is intelligent, I'll give him that, and he does understand the issues. But everything, like, I feel like if I was trapped in an elevator with Alex Stein, I would have to choke him unconscious to get a moment's peace.
I'm already turned off with the topsider shoes with no socks. I'm out. That's it for me. Like, I don't need, what is that? That frat boy.
I will say this. I want to say that I saw Alex Stein. I think it was a video with him in it where somebody threw a shoe at him. So he threw their shoe on the roof and was like, there, now you don't have a shoe. And that I enjoyed.
Yeah. He's done some funny things. But as far as that moment, like, John is just typical in that there's no logic, or like you were saying before, the CNN talking points. There's nothing logical coming out of that brain of his.
No, it's just hatred.
Yeah,
he just hates right wingers.
Zero substance. I mean, it's one. I don't. That's fine, but give me a logical argument. Let me give me some logic. He has zero logic. And his opinions had logic, and he made John look stupid. But at the end of it, John swore up and down. He just rolled over Stein. It was like you didn't even say anything.
What John loves to do is just declare victory, no matter what happens. I win. I win again.
He believes it, though. He believes he did.
He was running through a litany of illogical and specious conclusions one day, and he's like, "Well, you see, the dues payer is wrong because this, which made no sense, and this, so I win again there." And this, which also made no sense. So that's like 5 or 6 things that I won just right then and there. And no, it's not. But obviously he doesn't care. He just wants to declare victory. So.
he is just unbelievable. I can't even put it into words like what I watch every day. It's like you can't write this stuff, as they say. Every time he turns on his mic in the video, he gives his enemies so much ammo just by opening his mouth. It's just amazing. He cannot possibly he's just terrible at it.
Well, that's what it is. John desperately wants to be and do certain things, but he lacks the component talents to be and do those things. And so he sets himself up to fail. You know, for example, in the past, he has tried to roast Karl and Shuli back, which makes sense. If they're making money making fun of me, I could make fun of them and I should be able to make money too. The problem is that because he has no sense of humor about himself, because he's motivated by resentment and anger and hatred, it doesn't come across as funny in any way, and therefore it's not entertaining. People's bitter recriminations generally aren't funny. George Carlin, towards the end of his life, was just really pissed off at everything. And that's not funny anymore. And he wasn't funny anymore because he was so bitter. So John, his political takes are all rooted in hatred of people who disagree with him. And it's compounded by the fact that he doesn't really seem to believe the party line that he is espousing. It's almost like somebody told him that if you want to get ahead in life, you have to be a left-winger. So that's what he did, despite his long history of political incorrectness, which doesn't matter anymore because it was so long ago, according to him.
Yeah, I think that, and I think that's the most painful thing about his political show. He's such a virtue signaler, and there's nothing worse to me than virtue signalers.
Well, hypocritical
hypocrisy.
Yeah. The last thing this guy should be policing is hypocrisy, because he's full of it himself.
But that's common in the Dabbleverse. Everyone's hypocritical in the Dabbleverse.
Well, human beings are hypocritical by nature because it's very hard to be consistent in all things. But John himself, massive hypocrite, like more so than the average person. So,
yeah, he is, and that has a lot to do with his everything, his makeup, his past, his fame. You know, he did have a lot of fame, you know, through the Stern shows. I mean, he's like, and I always want to give him credit, you know, despite whether people think he fell forward or
failed upward.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, at the height of his hour, let's say, he was making what, like $500,000 a year, and he was the announcer for the Tonight Show. A guy who stutters is the announcer for a national television show. That's impressive. The problem is that this was all decades ago, and he still acts like he's an A-list celebrity today. You know, he was only ever a B-lister at best.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like we all have a certain amount of street cred, so to speak. But there's a time when that starts to wear off. It's like, okay, we're here now. You know, so let's say like Chad Zumock the other day when the Quadfather was on MLC, he's like, who is this Quadfather guy? What is he doing here? It's like, I hate to tell you, you're really not much better than him in whatever you think this is, you know? I mean,
well, that was a fascinating I watched that interaction. I almost never watch Kevin Brennan, but I tuned in just because he had Chad on at that moment. And Chad had been talking about me because he was talking about my appearance on WATP. So I had Chad on the mind at that moment. And I tuned in, and the Quadfather was absolutely stabbing him over and over again. Just zing, zing. And Chad, you could watch him downshift through all the defensive techniques in his repertoire that don't involve actually witty rejoinders. They were all just like rhetorical methods. So the guy was trying to talk, and Chad would be like, yeah, what's next? What's next? What else you got? Well, it's not really a response. It's just a way of deflecting. And so to see him like run through his entire gamut of defensive methods was pretty impressive, because that Quadfather was giving him a hard time.
Well, the Quadfather is experienced in this. I mean, he does the BYB podcast, you know, 2-3 nights a week. It's not like he just started doing this yesterday. He's earned a spot to be where he was the other day. And it's like John's retorts. Chad is supposed to be the funny one in the comic, and he's up there telling, this guy's not funny. Yeah, nice try, blah, 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 you're bombing, whatever. And yet, Chad never says anything funny for the most part, you know? I mean, he's as delusional as everyone else.
The most funny Chad ever was when they got him to agree to prank John by putting up the fake Venmos, because I think the people who don't like Shuli and don't like Uncle Rico, I think they missed the point of that prank, which was John has his hands in everyone else's wallets all the time. And he was losing his mind at the thought that the person on screen with him was getting money that he was not. Yeah. It was driving him up a wall. It was a masterful prank. It really was.
It was good.
As somebody pointed out, I think it was on my stream earlier today, John can't trust anyone, and I don't blame him, because he's been pranked so many times. Anyone who interacts with him could be trying to prank him, and he's not able to tell.
This is his fault, though, because he can't carry a show on his own. That's the problem. He needs somebody. He needs other people. It's almost like Chad in a way as well. These guys aren't as witty. Kevin Brennan, to me, is witty. I mean, I know people hate him and stuff like that. Melton is witty. I know people hate him too. I mean, you gotta have fans and you gotta have people that don't like you, but they just lack the speed and the quickness to make quick jokes, to react, to adapt. Well, they're asking people, you have any ideas for content? It's like, you are the content creator.
Right. Well, when a Kevin Brennan or a Patrick Melton takes a piece of content and comments on it, there's something there. There's value added there when they do it. I watched Melton analyze a video of Aaron and April Imholt, and he was talking, they were fighting on air and he was analyzing it. And it was fascinating listening to him take that apart. Yeah. And he's got his downsides too, because when a guy does like a 7-hour stream, there's no chance I'm tuning in for that. But when you excerpt a portion of it and it happens to be this discussion, that I'm interested, then I'm on board. Yeah. But Chad and John, when they watch something, they'll just sit there staring at the screen and occasionally go, oh, yeah, this guy, look at this guy wearing his hat. Terrible. And that's not value added. You're not doing any commentary. You're just yelling at the video for existing.
They're bad at everything they do.
Well, and I don't understand how a petty criminal like Chad has the persistence that he's shown. This is a guy who's failed at everything in life, but also has a criminal record to show for it. Credit card theft and, cracking up cars and losing his jobs over it, and stalking and just, the guy has issues. So I don't get how he remains a persistent figure in this universe, because he's genuinely a little scary.
I think that I'm willing to, give people second chances and stuff like that. As far as, he touched radio. He's been around for a little while. He's been on stages. I'll give him some credit too, much like I give John credit. But I think the problem is with both those guys is they are their own worst enemies in everything they do. Every relationship, every podcast they put on, the reason people are making fun of them and trolling them, it's all starts with them, and they never see that.
No, and I think that goes back to the fact that they don't have a sense of humor about themselves. You've got to be able to laugh at yourself, and I don't think that's something either one of them can do.
That's bingo. If I had a sound effect, I would ring the bell or something. That's it. One thing I wanted to bring up about John, which segues into this really nicely about they're their own worst enemies, is John's all about don't troll, don't talk about my kids, don't talk about my family, whatever. Okay. But John is the one on Twitter posting pictures of his kids.
Well, not only that, but he talks about the families of his enemies plenty. Matter of fact, he was he was on one of the Reddits and he knew there was a picture of Shuli's family and he tried to pretend like he didn't know and he scrolled right up and he left it on the screen. It's like, we all know what you're doing. You're not fooling anybody with these grade school level deflections.
Right.
Because since he feels wronged, he feels it's okay for him to do absolutely anything in retaliation. And so he doesn't understand that there's a difference between Uncle Rico making a couple of jokes about his adult children and him showing or threatening to show information about and pictures of minor children belonging to Shuli. Like, there's a big difference there. If someone puts up a YouTube video and your minor child is in that video, there's a specific reporting field in YouTube for that issue. You know, that they take that very seriously.
Yeah, they do. And I guess my point, it really came to a head when I really thought about this Twitter stuff, because he's tweeted pictures in the past of his kids, but lately, like he apparently a couple of weeks ago, he has a new girlfriend or whatever, and she has apparently 2 underage kids. So if I'm wrong, I apologize. What I remember is seeing the picture of John, his person he's dating, and her 2 kids. And I'm thinking, you idiot. Why would you tweet that picture? Now, do you know if he tweeted that picture? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, he tweeted it.
Okay.
And then right after that, any discussion of this woman and her children completely evaporated. The speculation seems to be that she was not okay with him tweeting that picture out, or maybe it simply became a moot issue because, like, they met his kid. He specifically went to meet her children and hang out with them, which is like the next stage in a relationship. And then nothing came of that. So, and there was a while ago that he had a different woman in the background of a video. Yeah. So I think it's the case that this guy is dating and trying to find someone. And I also think he's not meeting with success. I don't think there is a steady girlfriend in his life, and there has not been.
Once again, he's his own worst enemy. You don't, especially when you're a stuttering John. You
do have to be careful what you tweet out.
Have you ever heard of Facebook private? Like, that's why I do not excuse it. I do not excuse it. He should be protecting his girlfriend or the person he's dating, and he should be protecting those kids. He's thinking about himself. He's thinking about his image. He's thinking about his Twitter. There is no reason he should be tweeting any pictures of any relationships, blood or not, on Twitter. Keep it to Facebook. Keep it to your friends and your family, and keep it private. He has no reason to say anything about anyone commenting on a picture. He shouldn't have put it on Twitter to begin with, and you're an idiot for doing it.
I've seen that before. Over the years, I've gotten into various spats with people online, and every once in a while, someone will come at me and attack me and be really vicious about it. And if I go over to their social media, I'll see them posting pictures of their children. And I'm like, look, man, I'm not a psychopath, so you're not going to get any problems from me. But point of order, you can either start wars with strangers on the internet, or you can post pictures of your children. You can't do both.
You can't have it both ways.
Absolutely.
You make a private person a public person with one click of a button that they didn't even want to be public. It just shows the mindset. It's all about him. And I'm, there's a debate, does Shuli go too far? Does Karl go too far? All that stuff. But I think on the whole, I think the jokes that Shuli and Karl tell about John come from a place of humorousness and from a place of, look, John is putting this out there and we are mocking what he is putting out publicly. Mm-hmm. I don't get the sense that what they're doing is mean-spirited. There is, however, a blurring of that line when John comes at them and uses underhanded tactics in an attempt to destroy them in a way that is dishonest. When John lies about, well, I'm disabled, so you can't criticize me because you're picking on the handicapped, that's dishonest. And then when he tries to deplatform people, or he crows about going after Shuli's sponsors, or he smugly celebrates because the Shuli network was down for a few days because the YouTube algorithm misinterpreted something in one of their videos as animal cruelty, because there was a rooster at the beginning of their video intro. It makes it very hard to sympathize with him, because
he approaches everything from a place of absolute mean-spirited, I will destroy you. And I think his critics, on the whole, come from a place of laughter.
I think Shuli's a little bit more vicious, but I've also said in my past videos that Shuli owes John for that because...
Well, yeah, they have a history, and, when Shuli first started coming at Stuttering John, it was because John had been trying his best to hurt Shuli for a long time. Essentially trying to get him fired. So I don't blame him for that resentment at all. And honestly, at some point, both Karl and Shuli realized there's gold in them our stutterings because, it became an industry unto itself. We make fun of John and we get attention. I started talking about Stuttering John on my channel for only one reason, and that is I was so annoyed at seeing the things he said while I was consuming this as entertainment that I'm like, I have to say something. So I put up the video, and then I put up a couple more, and that's the only reason my channel got noticed. I went from, a pitiful 250 subscribers 2 weeks ago to a slightly less pitiful 1,000 subscribers today.
Yeah.
And it's only because I hit on a topic that other people are interested in. And sadly for all of us, that topic is Stuttering John Melendez.
Well, Phil, let me give you a little bit of credit. And by the way, I probably need to do a better job of plugging. All your stuff's in the description. But I saw your rise to fame in the Dabbleverse, and I saw you early on. I'm an OG Phil Elmore subscriber. But I'll be honest, I think the first video I saw was a steel toe video. I'm like, okay, that's interesting because I've interviewed Aaron from Steel Toe on his channel. He was like number 4, I think, and you're number 12. I know people, I know you're not a fan. That's cool. I'll just say this, out of all the people I've dealt with behind the scenes, he's one of the coolest.
That actually doesn't surprise me because this is a guy who has a little bit of experience in like entertainment as a medium. So I would expect him behind the scenes to kind of get it. Yeah. And I realize a lot of what happens in front of the camera is a persona. I still find some of the things he's done and said unlikable, but I don't, I don't hate any of these people. Like, I don't, there's no hatred in my heart for any of these people. And I kind of approach it from a lighthearted place of analysis and commentary, because none of these people have harmed me. I dislike some of the nastier stuff that John does. It's very frustrating when he gets smug because he's so pleased with himself and has so little right to be. And that's actually frustrating to just watch from the outside. But again, it's not hatred. No. I certainly, I don't wish ill on any of these people. And I'm not saying I'm above taking a little bit of joy in the misfortune of my enemies, but none of these people are my enemies, except in the most abstract of ways that, John hates me for being a Republican. He doesn't hate me personally. He just hates Republicans. So, it's easy to dislike someone who has expressed a lot of hatred for anyone who is not on their side.
Yeah. But you yet is the key word, yet, on the enemies thing. If you stick around in the Dabbleverse long enough, I've already noticed you're starting to get some arrows coming your way a little bit. I don't want to go into detail on that.
Some of it I didn't even understand. There were people making comments, and I'm like, I don't even know who that is. So-and-so is mad at you. Who is that? Like, and I think some of it's trolling. Some of it, too, is not even people in the Dabbleverse. I have, it's a pre-existing condition. I can't get health insurance for it. I have people who don't like me from way back. So I strongly suspect in some cases when I get negative comments that it's just yet another sock puppet for 2 or 3 people that I know just on an ongoing basis dislike me and need to say that.
Right.
I just don't let it bother me. And I think that's why I'm able to bring an attitude of, that's okay to this whole thing, because 20 and 30 years ago, I was getting grief for my opinions and arguing with people on the internet and getting that out of my system. So, when you've been insulted by people, when you've been insulted by the best, these insults, they hardly measure up. Yeah,
that's true. But back to your rise. So I saw the steel toe, and then I saw your first John. And I think it was a video that had a lot of different things, and Stuttering John was one piece. And then the second video did was Stuttering John. And I was like, because I'm like you. I started the same way. I have opinions and I consume YouTube all day long, and it's like, I want to be a part of the discussion. So I want to interview this person. This is what I would ask them. So a year later, here I am. But, so I saw you, I think I commented, I subscribed to you, you subscribed to me. And then like in the last week, you went from that to like 1,000 subscribers. You've been on WATP, which is the holy grail of this whole Dabbleverse as far as a show, in my opinion, and most people's opinions. You've been on the Shuli Network BS show. You've been on Casey Armstrong's show. I mean, like Casey, Shuli, and John, to me, have a special place in my heart because they were on a Stern show for so long, So that, to me, that alone is a pretty cool thing. So yeah, man, you went, and I think it's because you brought some sort of intellect and neutrality into the conversation, and other people like Karl, like Shuli, and these people noticed it because you don't get a lot of it. And then I think people just love hearing your takes on this stuff, especially on John.
Well, I don't know how neutral I am. I mean, one guy was like, oh, he tries to be all objective, but he's actually a Shuli super fan. I'm like, no, I just like his show and don't like that show.
That was a poor choice of words for me. Maybe not neutral.
No, not
logical. I'm going to say logical. How's that?
Yeah, I try to give credit where it's due, because I think a person's criticisms hold more weight when they're willing to also give credit to the person they're criticizing for the things that person can do well. I've had people who didn't like my opinions try to come at me and go, well, you're also a terrible writer. And I'm like, that's objectively false. If you can't at least give me credit for the things that I provably can do well and have for years, then your criticisms are not going to hold any weight at all. And I think in this realm, it's really hard for some of these people, the people who, again, approach this from a 4th and 5th grade standpoint of, you're not my friend anymore because you said mean things about me. And I think a lot of the drama and a lot of the conflict comes when people who have that attitude come up against somebody who has the other attitude, which is, we're all going to make fun of everybody. That's the business. Like, that's show business, kid. So I think just being able to objectively give credit, even for people that don't like you and may have even spoken ill of you, that's really all it comes down to. And it's so easy to do that because really none of these people are going to duel each other in the street at the end of the day, no matter how much they claim they're going to. So maybe relax a little bit. Stop treating this like it's the mafia. Stop acting like all of you are going to be in the front yards of all the rest of you. None of you are. And the second one of you does, it's going to be like when, what's that guy's name? Boogie 298 or whatever his name is, who like fired a warning shot at somebody who came to his door. So, there's people take this way too seriously. And I'm not saying,
but that makes it fun. That makes it fun for us.
Yeah, the drama can be fun, and the drama is fun when it doesn't involve, like, we all enjoy drama that doesn't involve us. But I think there comes a point where you just got to go, for the love of God, stop challenging each other to boxing matches. Just stop.
That's stupid. I'm not a big fan of that. I think that's ridiculous.
It's like 2 race car drivers challenging each other to see who can change the tires faster, to see who's the better driver. Like, I'm funnier than you are. Let's box. Like, what would that prove?
Nothing. It just fight in an alley. Why make a spectacle out of it? Yeah, I don't like that aspect of it. But this podcasting, this comedy, this is a battle of wits. And that's the battle that needs to happen. A battle of wits. Not John screaming over Karl, not Chad doing whatever he's doing. Like, you need a good moderator. I would nominate myself or you to nominate a Dabble debate between 2 key characters that are bipolar opposites in the Dabbleverse.
A debate, if it's going to happen in good faith, has to happen among people of good faith. So, like, you and I could have a debate and we wouldn't be screaming over each other, and that's fine. Shuli and Karl could have a debate. I don't think either one of them would be screaming over the other. John cannot debate anyone because he'll just start screaming and chanting and singing to drown out anything the other person is saying. The only way you could facilitate that, and he would never agree to this, is his microphone would have to be off while it was the other person's turn to talk.
Yeah.
And you would have to switch the mic back and forth while each person took their turn. It's the only way.
That is the only way, but you have to be the alpha in the situation as a moderator or an interviewer. You have to get these guys in line and you tell them you got to take control. You can't let that happen. John, what you said is exactly right, but I noticed when John's on MLC with Kevin Brennan, he's different. Kevin sort of reins him in and keeps him from spazzing out like he does, which is an interesting dynamic.
No one else online can insult John over and over again the way Kevin Brennan does. John, with anyone else, would immediately go to war and would have nothing but bad things to say. And there have been times when he's been mad at Kevin and spoken ill of him, but all it takes is for Kevin to go, all right, you can come back on, and all's forgiven. And I think it's a combination of, I think he looks up to Kevin because I think Kevin represents what he wants to be in terms of his success. And I also think that he desperately wants to work with Kevin. And so he's still holding out hope that one day he'll have that coveted Bob chair that is sitting vacant in his mind. And I think that's why he got so angry when Zumach went back on MLC after those two were on the outs, because he's again hands in everybody else's wallet. If Chad is on MLC, that's screen time that I'm not getting. That's rightfully mine.
Right. But now you're getting screen time. Your name's being mentioned on all these podcasts. I want to talk a little bit more about that and how 2-3 months ago you could have never put yourself in a crystal ball and realize you'd be on all these shows the past week. And it's funny. I think it was Sunday night we were DMing each other about the interview and stuff like that. And I said, well, tomorrow's another day in the Dabbleverse. I wonder what's in store. And something along those lines, and you're like, yeah, you never know. And then at the end of the day, I said, when we were chatting this morning, did you think Chad Zumach would be talking about you on MLC and calling you some horrible name?
Well, and that's just it. I even reached out to him on Twitter. I'm like, hey, I know you're not a fan, but thanks for the coverage, because if he's talking about me, it's putting my name out there, to an audience of people who'd never heard of me. Suddenly, everybody, like, when so many people mention your name, even if it's in a negative way, like the what is it? The Obnoxious Bastards podcast, they mentioned my appearance on WATP, and yes, that's it. And it was not kind. They didn't have good things to say, but it's not a bad thing, because suddenly everyone in this universe is hearing my name, and that's driving a portion of them over to the channel, which is all that I want.
Right.
So, you have to be able to approach this with that attitude that if they're talking about you, even if they're yelling and insulting you, they're talking about you. That's a good thing. That's what you want.
It is. And that's how you develop a fan base, and that's how you get subscribers, because this would be a good segue. I want to get into MMA and early UFC, and I want to get into some of the other things outside of the Dabbleverse, self-defense and some of those things. But let's wrap up this Dabbleverse conversation real quick. It changes daily. And having someone talk about you is a good thing. Now, Melton talked about me once, several months ago, and it wasn't very long. He saw me with corn dip, and he said it was boring and weird and all this kind of stuff. But someone messaged me and said, "Hey, Melton's talking about you." And at this point, I didn't really know. I saw him coming on, but I knew who he was, but I didn't stick around a lot and get into his show. But that forced me to scrum through 4.5 hours. I'm trying to find about 30 seconds he devoted to me, to hear him insult me. And I thought it was funny. I didn't think he gave me a chance, honestly, but maybe he did, and he just didn't like it. But the fact of the matter is, everyone in this universe, we're putting our stuff out here, and anyone could critique it any way they want. Chad Zumach, you are open to criticism. Stuttering John, you are open to criticism. You are not immune to criticism because you hit that upload button.
I don't think you understand. I am disabled, and therefore you cannot criticize me, because that's hatred.
Yeah. But I tell you what, when I listen to Melton, I have a sense of humor, and it didn't bother me. And then I noticed my views for that video started going up. So I was like, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.